I'm Bob Henderson. I'm the Nomad Dad. I'm the father of the Nomad Capitalist, Andrew Henderson. And I might tone it down just a little bit, but stay with me. The idea of Nomad Capitalist, I think, is a tremendous idea, but, here we are in the 2020s. It's been around in some form before, but mostly it was reserved for the really wealthy. I wanted to talk about, because I got to thinking about this whole thing as Nomad Capitalist Live came up in September over in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And I attended, I did a speech, and boy, talk about jet lag, 20 hours from New York. But anyway, I'm not sure I'm going to do that again anytime soon, and 20 hours back too. Anyway, there have been a number of figures, and you would know the names of most, if not all of these people in history, that have had dual citizenship, first elsewhere and then becoming U.S. citizens. Albert Einstein, for instance, I think he became a U.S. citizen around 1940. This is one of the greatest scientists of all time, the theory of relativity. I think in high school, the science teacher asked, it was a substitute teacher asked one of my classmates, do you know the theory of relativity? And he says, yeah, everyone's got a relative. That's not what it was, but Albert Einstein. How about Henry Kissinger? He was the Secretary of State during the Nixon administration in the 70s. Had a lot to do with the Nixon goes to China thing and opening up relations with communist China starting 50 years ago, and all the ramifications out of that over the last 50 years or so. Henry Kissinger was a German citizen, and he escaped Nazi Germany in the 40s. Madeleine Albright was born in Praha, that's Prague, Czechoslovakia. What was Czechoslovakia at the time. She became the Secretary of State in the 90s in the Clinton administration. I believe she might have been the first woman to be Secretary of State. I know George Bush had Condoleezza Rice about 10 years later. But tremendous accomplishments from her. Good thing she became a U.S. citizen. How about Arianna Huffington? You know the HuffPost today. Arianna's in her early 70s. She was born in Athens, Greece, came to the United States. I think she was married to a U.S. senator at the time from California. Was he Michael Huffington? I can't remember. They're no longer together, but the wonderful thing she's done with digital media. And, oh yes, one of my favorites, I'll be back. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Austrian citizen, became a U.S. citizen, the great bodybuilder, and I'll be back. He was the governor of California for a while, about 20 years ago, won in a recall election. Things were even messed up badly enough back then he couldn't fix anything. You're a movie buff? How about Audrey Hepburn? Born in Brussels. She was a Dutch citizen too, I believe. The great movies, Roman Holiday and Breakfast at Tiffany's. I don't think that movie was all that popular, but the song Moon River from the movie, I think everybody knows that beautiful song. Alexander Hamilton, he was a founding father, but he was not born in the United States. He was born in the Caribbean. I believe it's St. Kitts Nevis today. And he at one time was on the $1,000 bill. Those were bills just used among the various Federal Reserve banks. Oh yes, Frederick William von Steuben, who was born in Prussia. It is Germany today. He was in the Prussian military, and he spent a lot of time and fortune to help the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War, and the contributions were endless and extremely important. Maybe we're still part of Great Britain if it wasn't for this gentleman. These are people that have become U.S. citizens, and the whole idea, even back in the 18th century or the early 20th century, where a lot of these people that I'm talking about were in that era. So this whole idea, because sometimes I think Nomad capitalists, they talk about, well, maybe you should get a second passport or dual residencies, 2 or 3 of them. Oh, I can't do that. Look, this has been happening for a long time. People have already dipped their toe in the water. They swum out to the deep end. And, it's something maybe for you to consider. And that's why I bring it up. We're at a perilous time in history, and this thing could go either way. I'm not sure which way it goes, but I'm a huge proponent of freedom, and I'm seeing that freedom lost, and maybe we need to find another alternative. This has been done before. I'll give you one last example. Cornelius Vanderbilt, they called him the Commodore. At one time, I think he was the wealthiest man in America. He had shipping, he had railroads, the whole thing. And he had multiple residencies around the world. He had mansions in New York City and Newport, Rhode Island. And I believe his grandson, Frederick William Vanderbilt, had the mansion at Hyde Park in New York. And I passed this. I'd forgotten the Vanderbilt mansion was in Hyde Park. And I went right by it on my visit to the birthplace of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, a couple of years ago. And so, you know, Vanderbilt passed his wealth on to the younger generations and had this whole idea of, you know what, I should move some of my assets, maybe from just New York to Rhode Island or New York to you name the state, because maybe some politicians in some of these states won't be so kind as there will be somewhere else. Or I should move it offshore from the U.S. maybe to, I believe he had citizenship in Nicaragua. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do know that he moved assets there because it's diversification, not by asset type, but by geography as well. These were smart things. This may have been one of the original nomad capitalists. You know, go where you're treated best. Take your assets where they're treated best. Wealthiest man in the country at one point, Cornelius Vanderbilt. So I think these are some things to consider. Nobody says that you have to pick up like Vanderbilt or some of these other people and move you and your family to another country. Maybe you just go part-time. Maybe if you don't leave your country of residence, you could move some of your assets elsewhere and diversify a little bit by geography. That's why I bring it up. I was at the Nomad Capitalist Live conference, and these are the kinds of ideas that come into my head. I'm thinking about stuff all the time. Maybe it's one of the reasons I don't sleep that well. Oh well. I'm Bob Henderson. I'm the Nomad Dad. See you next time.